Action.
It's no, I not even need 3, 2, 1. Just it's action. What's up, everyone? It's Penuel the Black Pen, and I'm quite honored today that I'm going to be sitting with a very beautiful, very amazing, very, very intelligent young lady called the Princess Mthombeni, who's going to be schooling myself and hopefully the rest of you on nuclear. Not the bombs, which we're all scared of, but on nuclear in its totality. And I'd like to welcome her today. Sis Princess Unjan.
Hello, Penwell. Ngiyaphila unjani?
I'm all right, thank you. I am here to learn today. We met officially for the first time in St. Petersburg in Russia at the Russia-Africa Economic and Humanitarian Forum. What a long word. And I was opened up to a world of nuclear. I didn't know what nuclear was really about. I'd heard certain things about energy. A lot of us know about the bombs. There's a new movie that's come out, Christopher Nolan, Oppenheimer, about the gentleman who I think officially released nuclear bombs for the first time. But we don't know much, and I'm hoping that you'll school us today, if you don't mind. What is your role in nuclear? What do you know about nuclear? And maybe even just tell us, like, where's home and where do you come from?
Okay, my name is Princess Mthombeni. Many people call me Princey. Born and bred in KwaZulu-Natal. I grew up in Ngutu. I did my primary school years, Lapo. From there I moved to Enanda, eThekwini, where I did my secondary school years. Then I moved to stay for Sloras with my grandparents, Menza Umetric, Lapo. I am a nuclear communications specialist, but I'm also a founder of Africa for Nuclear. That's basically who I am.
What is Africa for Nuclear?
Africa for Nuclear is a campaign that I founded on the basis that I want to advocate for nuclear as a key contributor to achieving the African Union Agenda 2063 aspirations.
Please say that again, slowly.
Okay.
African Union?
African Union Agenda 2063 aspirations.
What is that? 2063 is a year in the future?
Yes, in the future.
Okay. Please, can you tell us what that's about?
It's basically a document that says Africa is the future powerhouse of the globe.
Yeah. And there's a plan for 2063?
The easiest.
I've never heard of it.
You
And it
must
actually
Google
makes
it.
me sad. It's something we can find online.
Yes, it's there.
The African Union has set up a plan for the continent for the year, well, we have goals till 2063.
Yes.
And nuclear falls into part of those goals.
Not really. There's a goal for sustainable development.
Okay.
So I do believe that for sustainable development to happen, we need to address issues of energy poverty.
Okay.
And we need to industrialize Africa.
You said you're a nuclear communication specialist.
Yes.
What is that?
It's somebody that actually talks about nuclear in a form of a simple way, who is not technical, like engineers and scientists. So who create more awareness, public awareness of nuclear.
Usiso Pumengotu in rural KZN. Inanda, I believe, is a township,
Yes.
Durban. You get to Forslo, which is also a township, Eguruleni in Gauteng. How do you find yourself getting into this career?
One morning I was actually out of the job. Then
This was after school.
It was after school.
What did you study at school?
After doing my matric, I actually did a accounting course with one of the colleges here in Johannesburg. Then from there I got a job where I worked as an administrator. Then I was out of a job. Then I got a call from a recruitment agency inviting me for an interview in Pretoria in the nuclear organization. And then I went there. I got a job.
Do you remember the year?
It was, I think, in 2008.
2008.
Yes. I got a job. I did not want a job, but I got a job anyway because it was far from Forslo to...
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I got a job. I had to, understand, learn about nuclear for the first time. Among Sebenza. And I realized, there's a lot that as South Africans we don't know about, especially when South Africa. I didn't even know we had nuclear programs.
Yeah.
So then I decided that, let me further my education. I did marketing. Then I have honors in marketing.
Okay.
Then I did nuclear courses, training courses that happen all over the world.
Jeez. Would you say you found the love of your life in 2008?
Definitely,
Nuclear is the love of your life.
it is.
What is nuclear?
Okay, nuclear is largely obtained from uranium.
What is uranium?
Uranium is one of our mineral resources. We mine uranium.
Mm.
Sometimes it comes as a byproduct of gold.
Okay.
African countries are uranium, like in Namibia. Namibia holds 10% of the world's uranium. In South Africa, we also have uranium mines. Tanzania also, Botswana. So yeah, it is just largely obtained from uranium. Then they take that uranium by convert, because it's a raw material like gold, platinum. Then you overseas it to get converted. Once by
It has to go overseas.
Yes.
Okay.
Once by converter, it becomes uranium 235, which means it's splittable. Then by tata by fagago reactor, nuclear reactor. Then they split it. Ugu splitter, it's a process called fission.
Okay.
Fission process. And then when that process happens, uranium generates a lot of heat. Then they take that heat and generate electricity.
I don't understand anything you're saying. So uranium is like gold. We use gold obviously just to trade. We use it for gold-plated ornaments and those things. It's pretty to look at.
Mm-hmm.
Uranium is what? Is it a rock like coal?
It's powder.
Uranium is powder.
Yes.
It's a mineral that you find
Yeah,
underground, and you're saying sometimes it's a byproduct of gold.
Gold, yeah. And then Macedonians are a powder. They call it uranium ore, which becomes yellow.
Okay.
Yellowish.
It's a yellow
they
powder.
Say yellow cake, yes.
Okay.
Then they call it yellow cake.
And then they take this powder, and then you said something about splitting.
Yeah, okay, they take this powder, then by tata by converter, by it's a process. They convert it, they fabricate, and it's a whole lot of steps that happen before they can bring it back to a nuclear power plants like South Africa, Kuber.
Is it still a powder, or is it something else at the end of the process?
It's in a form of pellet. Masabe buisa beki by fage in what they call nuclear fuel elements.
Okay.
Yeah. Then batata loma nuclear fuel elements, but fage inside the reactor. The reactor, it's like a pressure cooker.
It's a stove of sorts, or
it's
a
like a
pot.
pot. Yes, a pressure cook. By faga pagati, then in a guna mans.
Water.
Yeah, they
ordinary
heat,
water.
Yeah, pure water. Yeah, and then when the process yogu splitter ama uranium, that fission process happen, amanzi aba heat in a very high temperature. Then batate be converted into steam. Then leso steam drives a turbine. A generator. Then they generate electricity.
I'm glad you're raising that, because I was going to say, a lot of people, a lot of us were not paying attention at school. A lot of us in primary school were taught how electricity works. Mm-hmm. But that was a long time ago, and we don't remember. These days, grown-ups speak about coal, solar, but they don't actually know
what's
how
happening.
Electricity works. What is the purpose of coal in the process of electricity generation? Because I heard you're speaking about steam and turbines. What is the role of coal, and what is the role of this uranium that gets split, that gets put in this reactor and then releases this heat? How does that end up creating our electricity?
Basically, the process...
You're going to have to say it slow, because a lot of South Africans don't seem to get it.
The process is just explained. It's the similar process in a coal-fired power plant.
Okay.
But the difference here, in a coal-fired power plant, you burn coal.
Okay.
But in a nuclear facility, it's the uranium that generates the heat.
You need the heat to boil water.
Yes. You don't boil water, you actually heat the water and then by a pressurizer or putting a boil so that it can create steam.
Steam?
Yes.
Because I'm thinking as a normal human being.
Steam generators.
Okay.
In a nuclear power plant. Then those steam generators, at my releaser is steam, they drive the turbines.
Okay. That's a spinning motor.
Yes.
And that's where our electricity comes from.
Yes.
So in essence, I'm trying to simplify this, even for my own brain. Mm-hmm. We don't need coal. We don't need uranium. What we need are spinning turbines. that
No.
generate electricity. And the best way we found to spin those turbines is with steam. And the
Yes.
best way to get the steam is with these materials.
Yes,
And that's the link.
that's the link.
Because a lot of people don't seem to understand
Mm-hmm.
that. And like I said, we were taught in primary school, but we forgot.
Yeah.
So when people tell us about amalahle, the coal is wet, we're transporting this quality coal, I don't think most people understand what that means. Because now, for the work you're doing, if people are saying coal and people are saying nuclear, when the debate comes, we need to know where this falls in the line of electricity. And the major thing is what can release steam the best and the cheapest.
All right. I don't think we don't need coal though. But
Okay.
what I'm saying is, okay, the difference again here is that when you use nuclear power plants, they don't release emissions into
Like coal does.
like coal does. That's
When
where
you
the
burn it.
difference is, and
Okay.
that those who are fighting, the environmentalists or those who are anti-coal, they're fighting because they are saying coal pollutes the environment. Yes, with nuclear, you get into a nuclear power plant, no emissions, nothing. It's just a clean form of generating electricity.
How has your journey been since 2008 when you started, got your honors in marketing, went and studied nuclear? How has your journey been, maybe in summary, from then to who you are today? Because you essentially, I think, probably one of the biggest voices, not in the country, but on the continent for nuclear.
My journey has been very interesting, I must say, because in such that I was exposed to different countries and in the same industry, but I also got to know a whole lot of people. I know people from all over the world. Like I get to Germany, I have allies there. I get to Vietnam, I have allies there. Ghana, everywhere. So my journey has been interesting in such that I met interesting people, but also I got to learn more about what's happening in other countries, because I think the problem starts when you sit in South Africa and Google information and think that what you have Googled are facts.
Yeah.
Whereas with the difference with me is that I talk about what I have seen, what I have also heard from people who are based in those countries.
Yeah. I wanted to speak about Coburg, but before Coburg, I wanted to speak about you're studying overseas. Who it was funded by, if it was funded, if it was bursaries, scholarships, and do you know what their end goal was from a nuclear perspective? I want to ask that, and then I also want to go all the way back to apartheid. But if you can please start with that.
All right. Luckily, with the nuclear industry per se, it's a global industry.
Yeah.
So, and also countries, a nuclear transaction is a transaction between governments, not just individuals.
Okay.
And then, so those governments, they have cooperation agreement, the countries, different countries. Like South Africa has cooperation agreements with Russia, China, France, US. So when they have these programs happening, they actually fund people who they invite to come and attend these training courses, those countries.
Do you know if they're still doing it? I ask in particular for young people that might be interested.
Definitely, they're still doing it. But what happens with this industry is that they want people who are already in the industry.
What does that mean? Like working or having studied?
Either working or being an intern there, but you have to be already be in the industry to be able to attend those courses.
So what is the best step for a matriculant if they're like, I want to get into nuclear? Where do I go from here? Is there something I study? Do I just need to apply?
Yes, they need to study. They can study nuclear degrees or nuclear science.
Are they available in this country?
They're available in especially in the Northwest University, the University of Cape Town. It was available in VETS. I don't know if they have phased it out yet. They were talking about phasing it out.
Okay.
So we do have nuclear science and engineering degrees that are happening here, even masters, PhDs.
And then once they're in there, it'll probably be easier to access the network globally.
Yes.
I want to go all the way back to apartheid. So one of the stories that has come out, and maybe we'll speak about apartheid and go to Jacob Zuma. One of the stories is that the Afrikaner apartheid government was working with nuclear. And when the ANC took over, all of that work was, I don't know if it was shut down. I don't know if you have any information around what happened with the nuclear programs in South Africa before the dawn of the new democracy.
Definitely I do. But I just want to also say that the coal power plants that we see in South Africa, majority of them, they were built by the apartheid government.
Yeah.
So including the only nuclear power plant that we have in Africa, Nuclear Power Plant.
In Africa?
In Africa, yes. It was built by apartheid government. So they actually did industrialize this country.
Yeah.
But when it comes to a nuclear program, South Africa has been a player in the nuclear space since the 60s. We have a nuclear research reactor, which is based in, which is situated in Pelindaba. That research reactor is now used for manufacturing of different radioisotopes that are used, some of them in the medical field. And that reactor started operating in 1965.
The reactor you're saying is the cooker?
Yes, but that one is not a power reactor. It's a research reactor.
What's the
small.
difference?
The difference is that it can't generate power because it's just a small reactor.
Okay.
So the heat that comes out of that reactor, it's not enough to generate electricity.
Radioisotopes?
Yes,
What is that?
radioisotopes. So the medical isotopes that we manufacture in South Africa, they are called, some of them are called, it's molybdenum-99, technetium, iodine. They use them for, diagnostic and treatment of illnesses such as cancer and heart disease.
What's an isotope? Yo, now we're getting technical, Baba.
And an isotope is what comes out of when the research reactor, when you split that atom again.
It's the product.
It becomes, it's the product that comes out of it.
Okay, and you're saying the one
here
by
doctors, yes,
is used for medical
purposes.
Okay.
Not only medical purposes, because you also find that you use that those isotopes for what they call it's radiocarbon dating.
Okay.
Radiocarbon dating. Let's say, for instance, is it Sterkfontein in the Cradle of Humankind? Yes.
In the
those
West Rand.
skulls. If you go there, those skulls, they have information.
Yes.
And the only way to find that information is to use one of the isotopes,
which can calculate how old something
how
is.
old something is. Yes.
Okay. It sounds complicated for me while I'm listening. I don't want us to speak about the apartheid government, but it almost sounds like you appreciate the work they did. And I'm raising this because the question is, do you think the government since then has done much? If these guys laid the foundation in the 1960s and we have the only nuclear power plants on the continent, we probably should have done more, and it feels like we've stopped. It's almost like saying we were building rockets in the 60s and now we've kind of closed the rocket program.
I don't appreciate the apartheid government.
Yeah.
I just appreciate what they did for South Africa, especially industrializing South Africa.
Yeah.
I don't think I would have been exposed to nuclear if uBabes did not exist, if Nexa did not exist. It's very important to also note that at some point we in South Africa had nuclear weapons.
Weapons?
6 nuclear bombs, yes.
We had.
Yes.
We don't have them anymore.
We don't have them anymore. Because
where did they go? Like our gold. King Charles, where are our nuclear bombs?
So our nuclear weapons, they were dismantled. And just before the democratic government took over, so before the previous government handed over the country, they dismantled those nuclear weapons program. And we became the first country in the world to voluntarily dismantle our nuclear weapons program.
Do you know why? I think I have an idea, but I'd like to ask you.
We definitely do not need nuclear weapons
in
the world.
We do not.
I wish other countries can do the same, because they would do a lot of damage. They do a lot of damage. We know what happened.
Do you think the
Hiroshima.
apartheid government that built the nuclear bombs dismantled them because they were like, you know what, we don't need them?
Yeah, because they were about to get sanctioned, by the way.
Okay.
So they had to make a decision.
Do you
Because
not think it had to do with the fact that black people were coming into power and they didn't want to hand over those type of weapons to a black government?
it might be.
Okay. Well, smart diplomatic answer. I'll keep that stuff for myself. Kuberg, and you mentioned Nexa. What are those?
NEXA is the South African Nuclear Energy Corporation that houses the research reactor. It's called Safari
It's a
One.
location.
No, it's the organization. It's
Okay.
in Pelindaba.
Okay.
The nuclear facilities in Pelindaba.
Is it
They
our
house-
official nuclear head offices?
Yes, it's the nuclear not head office. It's the nuclear organization,
Okay.
which actually what happens at Nexa? They have that research reactor
Yeah.
called Safari One.
Okay.
Safari One is now it started operating in 1965. The one I just spoken about.
Yeah.
And then we also have a Kubach nuclear power plant in Cape Town,
Okay.
which generates about 5% of our total electricity.
5%?
By only 5%.
Of the whole country?
Yeah, there's only 2 nuclear reactors there in
Okay.
in Kubach, which Kubach started operating in 1984.
No, I need to stop there. Again, I don't know these things, and I know other people are going to struggle. South Africa is currently generating nuclear power,
Yes.
currently burning
Uranium.
to create electricity.
We
And you're
don't burn
saying
uranium, by the way. Yeah.
5% of all the power in this country is generated through nuclear.
Yes. Half
Okay.
of Western Cape community gets their power from Kubach nuclear
Half,
power plant.
50% of the Western
Yes.
Cape is powered by nuclear.
Yes.
Okay. Nexa, you're saying, is an organization. The reason I'm asking if it's the head officers is I want to know, are they the people that control all the nuclear information? So, for example, if you want to study nuclear sciences, if you want to work with other countries, do they have all that information, or are there other organizations in the country?
There are other organizations. Basically, the people who have control over what's happening, it's the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy.
Gwede Mantashe.
Yes. So
Ubabu
Nexa,
Gwede,
so
sorry,
Nexa,
Ubaba.
Nexa is one of the organizations under Department of Mineral Resources and Energy.
Okay. You guys feed
State-owned
up to
entity.
Gwede?
Yes.
Ngiyaxolisa baba. I keep saying Gwede. Yeah, no, let's not speak politics. My apologies. Kuberg, Nexa, do you work with them, and what work do you do there? Are you not allowed to speak about it?
No, I'm not. But
Okay. But do you work at Kuberg is what I'm asking. Do you work at Nexa?
no.
You don't work at any of these places?
I do work for one of the organizations, but obviously I'm here as on my own person.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
No, I understand. My apologies. I was going to ask what work you guys do, or what work you do there, etc. Nuclear has been getting a lot of bad press in the world because of the bombs, which you said are dangerous, and we'll cover those. I said after apartheid, I'd like to speak about Jacob Zuma. Ex-President Jacob Zuma at some point recommended a nuclear program, energy program in this country. I think it started a conversation with Vladimir Putin in Russia, and the media was generally against him. I think they still are. A lot of other political parties and a whole lot of other people believe that he's corrupt, that himself linked with the Guptas have looted the country. And they said they did not want a nuclear program. They said Jacob Zuma's corrupt. They just want to eat money, etc., etc. Do you think that the suggested nuclear program at that time was a good idea? Number one. Number two, do you think he was the right person to run it? Number two. And number three, do you think the concerns around cost and time were founded?
Okay, you might have to remind me of the three.
No problem. The first one is the program. Do you think it was a good idea?
Let me mention that the story of nuclear did not start with President Zuma.
Okay.
It started way before. During President Begi's time, we actually had a nuclear program here in South Africa called the Pebble Bed Modular Reactor, which was
Pebble Bed Modular Reactor.
PBMR, yes,
Okay.
which was being built in South Africa. And that Pebble Bed Modular Reactor program was placed under care and maintenance in 2010.
Okay.
So when President Zuma came into power, there was already a PBMR project in South Africa.
Okay.
So he also continued to the story of nuclear that has always been there, even before President Begi's time.
Yeah. This is from the apartheid government handing
Yeah.
over some of the program.
All of the programs.
Oh, besides the bombs.
Beside the bombs,
Okay.
because they were no longer there.
Okay.
Yes. So the story of nuclear basically has always been there,
Yeah.
and I think that it will always be there in South Africa. It will never end. After then President Zuma took over, then the PBMR was placed under care and maintenance, and then in 2010 there was an energy policy that also calls for nuclear as part of the energy mix, because I'm sure in all the countries they do have energy mix, because you cannot just rely on one energy source.
Okay.
It really will not power your country, and it also will not help in terms of industrialization.
Can you explain why that's important to an ordinary person? Why we can't? South Africa's rich in coal. Why can't we just rely on coal?
Okay, we've relied on coal. We're still relying on coal. So, but then now there are issues of reducing or mitigating CO2 emissions.
Okay, so part of it is for the environment and
Environmental
pollution.
pollution, yes. So now we need to, while we generate electricity or energy as a whole of it, we need to be mindful of the CO2 emissions, and the targets that have been put by the global policies, like the net zero carbon emission by 2050. It's one of
That
the
means
policies.
we don't want to emit anything.
Yeah, we don't need to. Yeah, we don't have to emit anything.
Okay.
But even if we generate electricity using coal, we need to use technologies such as clean coal. So we need to generate with, responsibility.
Okay.
To say we don't have to pollute.
Okay.
But also, I said we have to use coal. As I say, we still need coal as part of our energy mix.
Yeah.
Because if you take a look at all the African states combined, we pollute about 3% of the world's emissions.
All the African states.
All the African states. And that's the reason we're still a dark continent. We don't have power because we don't have enough power. When other countries were industrializing using fossil fuels such as coal, we were left behind.
No, it's important that you raise this. So there's a spotlight on South Africa. I don't know if there's a spotlight. It seems like there's a spotlight. Or Cyril Ramaphosa are always going to these places, president of the country. You're saying the entire African continent, not South Africa. The entire African continent only emits 3% of the pollution.
Yes.
But it almost feels like we're the one with the focal point on, and by us, I mean South Africa, not even the African continent.
The whole of Africa, by the way, not only South Africa.
Is being focused on.
Is being focused on.
For renewable, even though we're not emitting so much.
Yes, and their reasons are, we are, I don't know, what they say is that we, as Africans, we are sort of, I don't know, because of our poverty, then that makes us vulnerable to emissions.
That sounds like a theory, right? Like propaganda.
Yes, it sounds like that. So they say, no, they are taking care of us because we are...
They are taking care of us, as they have in the past.
Yeah, because the CO2 emissions consequences would affect us more. That's what they are saying. And if you check African states combined, they still pollute less than Yemen.
On its own?
On its own, a country.
Of which a lot of our good quality coal currently is going to Germany.
It's going to Germany.
And I think some to the UK, if I'm not mistaken.
It's going to Europe, not only Germany, by the way. But it also goes to South Korea, to China, to India.
Yeah. While we're being told to go renewable.
Yes.
Okay, that's politics. So we already had a program. It had been passed on. I'm glad you raised the year 2010. I'm not sure because I know load shedding, I think, might be turning 60 this year. Mthombeni, I don't know if you're aware, was trying to privatize Eskom, and that kind of failed. And at that juncture where it wasn't him, he was the president, but it was the ANC-led government was trying to privatize Eskom. It didn't go through. And in that process, it seemed like a lot of maintenance wasn't happening. And that led to the load shedding we have today, which is 16 years old. Do you think maybe at that time, the ANC, Thabo Mbeki, and maybe even Zuma when he came in was saying, look, we've got fossil fuel driven power stations. We want to carry on industrializing as the apartheid government had, but let's look into other options, of which nuclear was one of them. Do you think that was the mindset, or do you think there was something else at play? I know it's an unfair question.
No, the mindset was that obviously South Africa is a country. It does not, occupy the globe alone. We are also part of the globe, and also we signed as South Africa. I think it was in 2016 or before that when we signed the climate change. What is the Paris Agreement?
Okay.
For that talks about when countries should actually stop using fossil fuels. That Paris Agreement. So it was part of what the country has committed globally.
This was under President Jacob Zuma.
Yes.
Okay.
So when you sign that, then obviously you need to start looking into how you can diverse your energy sector and bring in the clean technologies.
So I asked the first question. The second question is, do you think that Jacob Zuma was the right person to carry on with the work that had been handed over to him? Because when he started speaking about it, the media, opposition parties, other people got upset as if he came up with this thing on his own of nuclear. Is it maybe the links to Russia, or do you think it was just because it was President Jacob Zuma?
President Jacob Zuma was the president of the country at that time. So any president, because as I said earlier on, the transaction of nuclear is between the states, not individuals. So he was the state president.
Okay.
And nuclear, Yona, as a whole, there's politics. It's a politically contested terrain. Energy, not just nuclear. Energy as a whole is a politically contested terrain. So you find these politics everywhere. It's not only because it was Russia, but
is
because
that
it's
one of the
nuclear.
reasons?
It might be one of the reasons, but also it's because it was nuclear. Right now I don't hear anti-nuclear lobby groups saying we would rather have nuclear from South Korea or from France. They just don't want nuclear.
Okay.
Yes. So for me, I always say it's probably an issue of us not wanting us to industrialize. They just want Africa to remain a underdeveloping continent. So the Zuma had every right to speak about nuclear. Right now we hear presidents such as Mthombeni in Uganda. He also speaks loudly about nuclear, wanting nuclear in his country. We also hear Rwanda?
Paul Kagame.
Yes, he also speaks about nuclear. So presidents, they have to pronounce their positions when it comes to the energy, development in their countries, because energy plays a critical role in developing countries. UK, before the new Prime Minister, the previous one, Boris, he was also talking about how important nuclear is for the UK to industrialize while, doing it clean.
Yeah. How do you feel after Zuma was dragged for nuclear, hearing almost the same people, the same media platforms, some of the same opposition parties, some of the same people now wanting to discuss nuclear, whereas they didn't then? How do you feel? Do you feel it's fair? Do you feel it was just politics at the time? Maybe they always were willing to engage it. They just didn't want certain people to be the ones entrusted.
I feel like they were misinformed.
Do you think they just learned?
Because as much as we might want to blame politicians for flip-flopping, they are misinformed. They don't know this information. They're just like you. So if somebody comes to them and say, we've got a lot of sun, we can generate electricity using sun, they're not technical people. So until maybe they learn the geopolitics of energy and understand how energy sector work, that's when now they start realizing that we were misled before. So it doesn't hurt me because I've been exposed to these things globally.
Sure.
It doesn't only happen in South Africa, fortunately.
Okay. What is our current stance on nuclear and nuclear energy as South Africa?
Our current stance is that we have Integrated Resource Plan 2019 to 2030 document. It's a
Integrated resource
IRP,
Okay.
Integrated Resource Plan, which is an energy roadmap. That energy roadmap has nuclear section. It's 2,500 megawatt capacity. And the decision 8 of that document says we need to commence with the preparation of nuclear build because it's a no regret option. That's what they say.
What does no regret mean?
I should ask them that.
Yo, that's interesting.
That's what they say. But then what they are saying is that we need to start preparing for procuring nuclear. And the preparations of procuring nuclear starts with, they have released, they've gazetted a request for information. And then that request for information is just to test the market. It's not really a quotation yet. In order for us to do a quotation, the minister, uBabes, had to, write to INERSA, the energy regulator, about his determination to procure the 2,500 megawatt of nuclear capacity. And then INERSA has to approve. They always do, especially with renewables. They are happy to do that because that's the process that needs to be followed. But with nuclear, they actually concurred because they call it, it's a concurrent that they have to approve. They concurred, but with conditions. They call them suspensive conditions, meaning that until those suspensive conditions are addressed, then we will not be able to gazette the request for proposal or the request for quotation, where we invite all the vendor technologies or countries to come and pitch.
The suspensive conditions have to do with the environment?
No.
Nothing. It's something else.
I can say I'm not really sure about all of them, but they have to do with who is going to operate the plant who's to buy it because Eskom is broke. And also the issues of rehabilitation process there when you have to decommission the plant because you also need money there. So it's things like that need to be addressed, and then once those are addressed, then we can release the request for proposals.
What's NERSA?
It's the Nuclear Energy Regulator of South Africa.
Is that maybe what I was confusing with NEXA?
Yes.
They have the same letters except for the C and the R.
Except for the C and R.
So NERSA is the official
regulator.
So everything goes through them.
Yes.
Or NEXA is just an organization.
Energy.
Everything energy.
Yes. Goes through NEXA. NEXA is just a nuclear organization.
Megawatts. I don't know if you can explain what a megawatt is, because a lot of us hear these things of this can produce 50 megawatts, but in our brains that doesn't mean anything. Can you explain the megawatts, the watts, or is that something we must check on the side?
I think check on the side because I'm trying to find a way to explain it in simple terms.
Okay.
Let's say you buy ilentuza, like this bottle of water. Bakutshela ukuthi izongena emaglazini awu-2.
Okay.
Ne? This you can only feed 2 people ngalamanzi.
Yes.
2 glasses.
Yes.
Yeah, those are megawatts in simple terms. Then now the difference is that it's just the capacity of the plant to say it's going to feed 5 million people with these megawatts. But then now, when it comes to energy sources that are weather dependent, such as sun and wind, then they tell you that this bottle of water is going to feed 2 people. But then they don't tell you that now only when there's sun, but when there's no longer a sun, those 2 people will stay hungry.
Sure.
Or this water is going to feed those people when they do not need water. Because it's like when you talk about wind and solar, it's like feeding someone when they already full. Because the most time when we need electricity is peak time. Like when we come back from work, when there's no sun.
When there's no wind. That's when we actually need the power.
Yes.
I hear you. You speak about Koeberg. You said Koeberg powers 50% of the Western Cape. Do you know how many power stations we have? And do you know how Koeberg, you call it Koeberg, compares to the other power stations in terms of cost and maybe sustainability?
I don't know the number of coal power stations that we have and renewables power stations, But I know that the current capacity that we have in terms of megawatts is 50,000.
Yeah.
Yes, in South Africa.
Okay.
But almost half of it is not working. That's why we have load shedding, because of plant breakdowns,
Yeah.
not being maintained and such. So it means that Eskom cannot even meet the minimum demand of 30, of 40,000 maybe, or even 35,000.
We have
which is the
capacity for 50,
Yes.
but we only need 35 to 40.
Yeah.
So we even have more capacity than we need.
That's
but
what
we're
Minister
not.
Mantashe has been saying.
Yeah.
So we can't even meet the minimum demand.
Yeah.
If you can check Eskom's Twitter yakona, when they released during load shedding peak hour, when they released those tweets, it says that the minimum demand is about 32,000. Because we could not meet that 32,000, therefore we had to load shed. And then the renewables that we have, okay, now we have renewables that are contracted by Eskom, wind and solar, and probably hydro.
That's water.
Yeah.
Okay.
But let's talk about wind and solar. And so it says that when the demand is high, now I'm taking this from Eskom
Yeah.
tweets. It says renewables, the renewables, Eskom, the contracted renewables in South Africa, 6,500 megawatt. So they supposed to give us 6,500 megawatt.
Yeah.
But when there's a demand and load shedding, Eskom says the only megawatts that we get from renewables are just 1,400.
Jeez.
It's not even half of what they are contracted.
Yeah.
And mind you, when they invoice for the whole 6,500
Are you serious?
megawatts. I'm being serious.
That sounds like something that needs an investigation.
Yes. All right. Now, you asked about
I just
the
want to
cost.
repeat that for maybe someone who might have been a bit slow. So there are suppliers
Yes.
of solar and wind
Yes.
in particular
Yes.
that are contracted to supply Eskom with
Eskom.
6,500 megawatts.
Yes.
And normally when we're constrained, they can only supply 1,000.
1,004.
But they are contracted and they are paid
Yes.
for 6,500.
Yes.
Okay, please continue.
Then what happens is that you asked about the issue of cost. So according to Eskom, remember now Kuberg started operating in 1984. So it's a paid off asset.
Okay.
It takes 20 years to pay off a plant.
Okay. It's
power,
like a house.
power plant. It's like a house.
Okay.
So with renewables, now I have to, please remind me to come back to the issue of cost.
Yeah.
A renewable plant, I don't know of a renewable plant that can operate beyond 20 to 25 years.
So it can
That's
only
very
last
important.
for that long.
Yes.
So it's like buying a house that after 20 years.
It's no longer there. You need to buy another one.
Okay.
Yeah. So Kuberg now is a paid off asset after 40 years.
Yeah.
So it was paid off after 20 years.
Yeah.
That's why when people say we can't afford nuclear, Kuberg can buy another Kuberg, because basically Kuberg is now helping Eskom to sustain itself with all these debts.
Yeah.
So according to Eskom, Kuberg, they is the cheapest among their fleet. Cheapest in such that Kuberg is per kilowatt hour is 10 cents.
Okay.
And then followed by Kohli 40 cents per kilowatt
10
hour.
cents versus
10
40 cents.
Yes, Kohli
I
40
want to show is
cents.
like SMS, Baba. SMS, yeah, 10 cent versus yeah, 40 cent is a huge difference.
Yeah, and then followed by renewables. Remember 6,500?
Yes.
R2.20 per kilowatt hour.
Hour.
And then index, it's like our electricity is regulated. You have to sell it. Eskom has to sell it to us end users, about 85 cents maybe. Now you do the calculations.
So nuclear can give us, well, Kuberg, because it's paid off.
Yes.
Maybe if it wasn't paid off, it would be a bit more expensive.
It would be, it would be a bit more, but not really expensive, because it's cheaper to operate a nuclear power plant.
Okay.
The only part that is expensive but still debatable is the construction part, when you need capital.
So 10 cents per kilowatt hour for nuclear.
Yes.
You're saying 40 cents for coal.
Yes.
And you're saying for R2.20
for renewables.
And Eskom can only sell power at 85 cents.
Yes.
Which means this R2.20, which you already said is a problem. in terms of their being able to supply, yet they're being paid. They're being paid R2.20.
Yes.
So whoever's an investigative journalist there is going to have to find out who these suppliers are to Eskom that are getting paid, that are not really delivering, and that are supplying energy that they're not even supplying at a price that is way higher. It's more than double the price of what Eskom can sell that electricity for. Okay.
It's been, by the way, debated in Parliament. Remember EFF asking the former deputy president, did you know
Mabuza.
that? Yes.
Okay.
They asked him, do you know that Eskom buys power from renewables at R2.20 but sell it at 85%?
85 cents.
You know, he said, oh, is that what is happening? So that's what is happening. So yeah.
Yeah. You spoke about the cost. Sorry,
before you continue, what the renewables proponents are saying now is that no, but renewables have become more cheaper now. We agree that they've become more cheaper, but they're still not even 40 cents.
Yeah. You spoke about the cost of construction, which seems to be one of the issues. I think Gusile Medupi,
Yes.
they had an initial quote budget and it's gone up in multiples. Would it cost a lot to build power plants? Well, a nuclear power plant, is it the same as building coal? Is it more expensive? Do you have any idea?
I want us to treat projects separately because they're not the same.
Okay.
So I cannot speak for coal projects. I know nothing about coal
Okay.
projects. With regards to nuclear projects, yes, I did speak about the issue of cost. But once again, transactions happen between states.
Yes.
Let's take, for instance, what has happened or what is currently happening in Egypt. By the way, Egypt is going to be the second country in Africa with a commercial nuclear power plant. Russians are currently building a nuclear power plant in Egypt.
Okay. After us.
After us.
We were number one. Donkey,
Yes.
National Party, and apartheid. Next is Egypt. No, sorry, that was a joke. But we've got a nuclear power plant, and Egypt is currently building one with the assistance of Russia.
Yes. So what happened is that in Russia, in Egypt, they are bringing, the whole plant is going to cost about 25 billion US dollars.
Okay.
So Russia is bringing $20 US.
20 billion.
Yes. Egypt only had to organize 5 billion.
Okay.
So what's going to happen is that that finance model is build, operate, own, and transfer. So once Russia make their money, then they will transfer the plant to the Egypt government.
Okay. So the 25 billion US dollars is a huge amount of money, but in the absence of not knowing how big the plant will be and how many people to supply, we can't compare. I'm just trying to remember. I don't remember if the potential deal we were going to do with Russia under Jacob Zuma was going to be 100 billion or 1 trillion. I remember there were figures thrown around at those times, and there were people in the media saying we don't have that money. And they were also saying that nuclear takes long. Even if we started today, we'll probably only start enjoying it. I don't know if they said 10 years or whatever. So there's the cost of building, and then there's also the time to build a nuclear power plant before we can actually enjoy it. Do you have any idea around that?
As I just said, in Egypt, Russians are bringing 20 billion. Government only has to organize 5 billion. Right now in South Africa, the Treasury just announced Uguti, there's a program called Energy Bounce Back.
Okay.
I don't know. You guys must check it.
Sure.
It's an energy bounce back scheme, guarantee scheme, and they are prepared to guarantee 22 million or 22 billion, something like that.
Dollars.
And
Rands.
So if I look at that, it's like we can build a nuclear power plant with that money only if the other country brings 85% of the total program money. So we do have money. We can afford, and then also you asked about
time. How long it would take from?
All right. Yes. If you look at countries such as US and France, remind me to talk about France later on. France, they have actually went beyond the construction, the set
Budget.
But time.
Oh,
time limit. Yeah. But if you look at countries like South Korea, Russia, India, and all their programs, they finish on time. Let's take a program that just that is happening or that just happened in the United Arab Emirates.
Yes.
By the way, the UAE is going to have a nuclear power plant for the very first time. They have it because it started operating 2 years ago in 2019.
Yeah.
They switched their first reactor in 2019.
Okay.
In the UAE project, it was built within a space of 7 years.
Okay.
So there are programs that finished on time, and also an issue of nuclear taking longer to build. I always have a problem with it. Imagine, you said load shedding is how years
16
old?
years old.
16 years old.
Yeah.
Imagine if we built a nuclear power plant then.
Yeah.
We would have
We'd
power
be
right
enjoying
now.
it now.
Yes.
Without getting too much into politics, just your personal opinion on why we have 50,000 megawatts of power and yet we're struggling to meet a demand of, let's say, 35,000. Yes, they speak about plants breaking down and maintenance, but do you think there's something else at play? I mean, we've got the capacity, but we're just not meeting it.
I was still talking about nuclear.
My apology. It's just your personal opinion on why we're struggling.
Um,
Because the biggest issue and the reason why we're even discussing nuclear for ordinary people is because of load shedding.
yeah.
If we don't have load shedding, it's like with anything else. When there are jobs, when the economy is going well, when there's no crime, people almost don't care about any other issues. You can bring in gender-based violence, you can bring in LGBTQI, people be like, we're fine. But as soon as there's issues, people can be like, look, it's because there's problems here. It's because we've got this. So load shedding has forced even people that didn't care. We didn't know where electricity comes from. Now we actually have a vested interest. So when you speak about nuclear, the ordinary person is like, if this will end load shedding, I'm willing to listen. So that's why I'm asking if you think or your personal opinion on why we're failing to meet capacity. You don't have to answer, but it's just...
Okay, I'm happy to answer.
Yeah.
Because I think what happened at ESCOM, they neglected the coal power plants. I did a video on TikTok saying, why is ESCOM neglecting their baseload power plant?
Yeah.
So they neglected these power plants because they were trying to push, whoever the CEO was, they were trying to push for renewables to come into the grid. So they neglected these coal power plants, and we ended up having power plants that are not working because no one cares. Everyone is obsessing over these renewables.
Yes, I've got questions to ask you, but they're political and I don't want to put you in a funny position. Maybe I won't ask the question. I'll say this. Brian Damas used to be the CEO of ESCOM back in the day, and today is the CEO of African Rainbow Energy under Patrice Motsepe. And last I checked, I stand to be corrected, Patrice or his companies or related companies have received 12 of the, 24, 25 independent power producer licenses, which were released at the time by his brother-in-law, Jeff Radebe. And you've got his other brother-in-law, Cyril Ramaphosa, who's been funded $8.5 billion US, not him, the country, to push for renewables, which the only reason I'm bringing this up is because you're speaking about the CEOs at the time that were not taking care of things. And I guess one of the concerns would be if we're building a nuclear plant and there's a push for renewables and it's funded, would we even prioritize those if there's already an agenda at play and if certain leaders and potentially their families and business people already have eyed money in certain spaces, which means we've got capacity now we're not meeting. Even if we build additional capacity, maybe we still won't meet it because there are agendas at play. And for an ordinary person who just wants electricity, while we're trying to build nuclear because it's arguably cheaper, arguably more sustainable, the world is speaking about it, maybe we're going to have to deal with other issues which are outside of coal, nuclear, emissions, etc. It's not a question. I just wanted to raise that. One of the concerns that are raised by the anti-nuclear lobbyists is waste. Can you address that, please?
Yes, sure. I think what has happened is that there's an anti-nuclear campaign, a global campaign that is out there, and they obviously have to target these areas that will scare people off.
Yeah.
And one of it is the issue of waste. Let me explain what is waste first in the nuclear sector.
Yeah.
We have what we call radioactive waste. Where do we get radioactive waste? after splitting the atoms you remember I spoke about the nuclear fuel element earlier on.
Yeah.
And now when that the uranium become obsolete, then you have to take those nuclear fuel elements and either reprocess them, or they become waste because you can no longer use them.
Can we take a step back? So we mine uranium, which you
Yes.
said is a powder,
Yeah,
and it forms a cake called a yellow cake.
Yellow cake, yes.
And then that yellow cake, you said, gets processed a lot to get into a product.
Converted into uranium-235.
Okay.
Then they put that uranium-235 in a form of pellet inside the nuclear fuel element.
Okay. A pellet is like small
They're
bullets.
yeah.
Okay.
But
like a
it's
pellet gun.
tube. Yeah, it's in tubes.
It's a
I
tube
think
pellet.
if people can Google nuclear fuel element, they will
Okay.
see how it looks like. Then those fuel elements they get put inside the nuclear reactor.
The pellets.
No, the fuel elements they
Okay.
are inside the tubes. Those
Oh,
pellets.
okay.
Yeah, inside the nuclear reactor.
With water, you said.
Yes,
Okay.
with water. Then the process I explained earlier on happens.
Okay.
Now, once they have generated electricity, let's say over 24 months,
Yeah.
then they finish. You have to now refuel. Yes.
Sure.
Then you have to refuel the plant.
Okay.
So when you take out the old ones, they become the nuclear radioactive waste. Not nuclear, the radioactive waste.
Okay.
Those ones are high radioactive waste. We have 3 types of waste in the nuclear industry. Those ones which are high radioactive waste, but also we have medium and low radioactive waste. It's like the clothes, those who work in the nuclear, in the radioactive plants or sections, abayigqokayo. Other radioactive waste is esibhedlela. Remember, I spoke about nuclear medicine earlier on.
Okay.
A sterilizer in the hospital, it's radioactive. It has to be disposed in a certain manner.
Okay.
And also, so we take that medium and low. So those are classified as medium and low radioactive waste. In South Africa, we manage and dispose in medium or in non-high radioactive waste at a place called Valpoort in Northern Cape.
Of course, it's the Northern Cape. Sorry, that's an inside joke for me because I normally say some things about the Northern Cape that my friends from there hate. Please continue. Valpoort in the Northern Cape. It seems like the Northern Cape is treated as a dump in this country from the days of the Kimberley Big Hole. Anyways, but it's a separate conversation for me.
It's not really a dump because if the law allowed it, I would have asked for that waste to be put behind my house. It's by the time it goes there, you can even put it here because it's already in a drum, concrete drum.
Okay.
Like it's already compressed concrete drum and everything. It's just to put it in an area that is not really
isolated from human beings.
No, a threat to natural disasters.
Okay.
That's why Valpoort.
Okay.
But it's not like they are dumped. There are people working with that waste. There's workers there making sure. What I like about the nuclear industry waste is that we take care of our waste. We know where is the waste that was made when research reactor at Nexus started operating. A scientist can take you to that drum.
Yeah.
So then the high radioactive waste, they keep it in the reactor, in the plant, under the pools, until it decays or after. But basically the nuclear waste has never bothered anyone. No one has ever in the world been exposed or died due to radiation or nuclear waste radiation exposure. It has never happened. So what people really make out of this waste is nothing.
That's what I wanted to ask. The dangers of radioactive waste. What does it do to a human being? I mean, we speak about gas. We speak about acid. Does this thing eat your skin? Does it make you sick? What is the danger of radioactive waste?
No, radioactive waste, let's say a danger of radiation, because it's not just the waste. Radiation is radiation. Even the sun, by the way, it's radiation.
So it's getting
so
burnt.
Whoever who is scared of nuclear, the sun is nuclear. Instead of being nuclear fission, the sun is nuclear fusion because the atoms there, they combine and make it the big round, the sun. So
No,
exposure
please stop there because this sounds like a movie now. You're saying the sun is nuclear,
nuclear
fusion
fusion, yes,
and not fission.
not fission.
Fission is the,
Fission is splitting of atoms. Fusion is atoms combining.
but it's the same thing.
It's the same thing.
When you guys are working with nuclear in fission, you guys are making mini suns, pockets of energy like the sun. Is that what you're saying?
Let's just say it can be something like that.
Jeez, that's
Yeah.
science fiction. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, please continue.
And
You're
by
speaking
the
about
way,
radioactive
yeah,
waste
talking about that
and
process
radiation,
of the
sorry.
sun, there is a nuclear fusion. Chinese have a what they call it's not a demonstration, but when something is finished but it's not yet used.
Prototype?
Prototype
Yeah.
of nuclear fusion, which is exactly what you are saying now.
I read 2 years ago these weird articles we read where the Chinese were working on building an artificial sun.
Yes, it's
That's
built-
what you're talking about?
Yes, that's nuclear fusion.
Jeez. Which would mean if you can, I don't know where you'd store it. That would mean something like solar. You're like, well, we have a sun that we use the whole day, whether
Yes,
it's dark,
yes.
nighttime or day.
Yes. So that's why sometimes I have my friend who's an engineer.
Yeah.
He says the proponents of renewables need to be taught that even these renewables, like sun, it's still nuclear.
Are you religious?
No,
You're not religious.
no.
I'm gonna touch on a religious topic now. We speak about the Creator, who created the sun and heaven and earth and the moons and whatever. And there are scientists that believe in the Big Bang Theory. And it seems like as we move forward in progression and civilization and technological advancement, human beings are able to create things. There are arguments now for people that can control weather. And now if we're getting to a point where we can start on a small scale building suns, then you start going into deep conspiracy theory where you say, look, there might have been civilizations in the past that actually built the sun we have today because we can build a mini sun now. And maybe they were the ones that built the pyramids and whatever. And maybe they got wiped out, we don't know. Or maybe they got hit by radiation and split into little atoms and now we're growing again. I don't know. Maybe that's the Big Bang. Maybe they built a bigger sun and they didn't know how to manage it. And then we had to start again and evolve. But I think it's an interesting theory because if you're going to say that the sun is arguably something like certain nuclear technologies and there are people in China who are building mini suns, what happens if they can find a way to make it float in the sky? What happens if they can make it bigger? All of a sudden we've manufactured a sun. Then you start asking questions which play around with religion and science of, but what if the sun we have now was manufactured by people before us or by higher intelligence somewhere else? COP26, COP27, COP28. 26 was in Scotland. 27 was in Egypt. 28 will be in Dubai. You've mentioned this to me before. I just forgot. You mentioned something about Scotland. That's where we got money, 8.5 billion. In Egypt, there was JET.
Yes.
What is JET? And then you wanted to speak about the plans for COP28 in Dubai, South Africa's plans.
All right, let me finish the story of radiation exposure.
Radiation, yes.
Yeah. So exposure to sun, obviously you can get cancer if you are
Yes.
too exposed to the sun. That's why you need to put on your
Sunscreen,
sunscreens
zinc.
and all that.
Yeah.
So it's the same as nuclear. We need to take care of the waste so that we make sure that people are not exposed to radiation.
Yeah.
We have international organizations, regulators. They're like International Atomic Energy Agency in Vienna. Locally, we have NNR, Nuclear National Regulator,
Yeah.
in Centurion. So those are people that are liable to make sure that people and the environment they stay out of the radiation. So they regulate Koberg and all those organizations. So it is a highly regulated sector.
Yeah.
And so, that's why even now, even after, 40 years of Koberg operating, no one in South Africa has ever been exposed to the radiation from Koberg.
Before we get to COP, is part of the concern that we'll run out of space to dump radioactive waste? And you mentioned something about decay. does the radioactive waste at some point become
Yes.
completely harmless to a point where, let's say like a skeleton, once you've died and your corpse, do the bones ever disintegrate so we can reuse the soil? Does the waste at some point become completely harmless and we can maybe reuse the space where we dumped it to be like it is now completely clear? It's a new piece of land or whatever.
Yeah, some of the nuclear waste is reusable.
Okay.
Yeah, they can recycle it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think we'll ever run out of space because let's take, for instance, countries like France.
Yeah.
Most of France's electricity comes from nuclear,
Okay.
like over 75%.
Yeah.
They don't even have uranium, but topic for another day.
No, it's a topic for today, which I was going to raise later. I don't know if you said you wanted to speak about France. I don't know if you want to speak about France now before COP or speak about France after COP.
It depends.
It's
But
your
now
call.
I'm not speaking about France. But France, the waste that has been generated by France nuclear power plant,
Yes.
they small enough to fit half of FNB Stadium. Since
waste.
like the waste, half of FNB Stadium.
Okay. So it's not a lot.
It's not. It's very small. That's why a pellet out of those nuclear fuel element tubes.
Yes.
That small pellet, it's big enough to generate electricity that can be generated by 1 ton of coal.
One pellet.
Yeah.
One pellet can generate as much power
Yes.
as an entire truck of coal.
Yeah,
or 1
entire
ton.
truck. No, 1,000 tons of
1,000
coal.
tons?
Yes.
With one pellet.
Yes. That's how small the nuclear waste is
When you have to dispose.
when you have to dispose it.
Yeah. Okay. Is that what you wanted to cover? Because earlier you said you'd like to speak about France.
I wanted to to cover the whole issue of radioactive waste.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. COP 26, 27, 28. And what is COP as well?
COP is the Conference of the Parties. As I said earlier on, countries signed Paris Agreement, which really, binds them from emitting more emissions.
Sure.
Yes. So South Africa is one of the signatories of Paris Agreement. So it gave birth to Conference of the Parties. They call it COP.
Okay. This is like follow-ups.
Yes.
Okay.
Where they really sit and decide that we should stop using coal.
So at 26, which was in Scotland, they said,
Yes.
South Africa has some money, go push
We-
renewable, sorry.
Yeah, we went to Glasgow, and
Yeah.
I was there, and I hear from the news while in Glasgow that South Africa just signed, or G7 nations or stakeholders have just given South Africa $8.5 billion US. Like, what? To stop using coal. I'm like, what's happening here? And then luckily I get to a press conference by Germany.
Yeah.
Then one of German politicians was addressing the press.
Yeah.
Then I get there with the cameras. I asked the question of, I hear that you guys, Germany just actually gave South Africa money to stop using coal.
Yeah.
Are you also doing the same in Germany? Then he sort of, I'm now paraphrasing, he says, no, we really need to help South Africa because it's a poor country. With us, we can always do it later on.
Wow.
He said that to me.
Wow.
Yes. So now let's, so I heard
Sorry,
that.
I'll keep my thoughts to myself. Because in South Africa, we've got rich white people and poor black people. And sometimes when you ask certain questions, you get answers like that. No, they poor. We can afford to sort out these things later.
Yes.
Okay.
So these stakeholders that gave South Africa $8.5 billion US, it's the United States, United Kingdom, Germany, France, and European Union, I think. Yes. Those people, they gave us $8.5 billion US to transition away from coal and use renewables. By the way, when we speak of renewables, we are not only talking about wind and solar, because hydro is also renewable. But when
That's flowing water.
Yeah, that's water.
Okay.
But the problem of South Africa and water. So when they speak about us transitioning to renewables, they're only talking about wind and solar and nothing else.
Yeah.
Yes. So they gave us money to decommission our coal power plants and start using renewables. The Integrated Resource Plan 2019 It
To
actually,
decommission means to stop using them.
to decommissioning plants.
Okay.
Yes. The IRP 2019, it says South Africa needs to decommission about 21,000 megawatt of coal capacity.
Do you know
Coal
by when?
plants by 2030.
2030 is in 6-7 years.
Yes. We've started with Komati Power Station.
While we're still struggling, we're being told
Yes.
stop using these power plants, even
Yes.
though renewable is struggling to even meet the
The
6,500 megawatts.
Yes. So we've already started decommissioning those coal power plants. Komati Power Station was decommissioned last year. Komati, I'm sure many people have heard Minister Mantashe speaking about it a lot. Komati Power Station in Mpumalanga, it was giving South Africa 1,000 megawatt. It has been decommissioned, and they are repurposing it with wind and solar and batteries. And all those three combined, they give us about 300 megawatt.
Meanwhile, you've shut down 1,000.
1,000.
And that 300 megawatt is capacity,
Yes, it's
which we don't know if they'll meet
Which we don't know they'll meet.
the 300.
Yes. And people have lost jobs in the process. Because that's another thing with these baseload power plants or sources like nuclear and coal.
Yeah.
If you go, I always challenge people to say, even I'm challenging you, Penwell, make an appointment with Kubek.
Yes.
To say, or even Nexa.
Yes.
I just want to come and visit your plant.
Is it open to the public?
Yes, it's open. And those are the only ones that are open to the public.
They're the only ones.
I
The
mean,
nuclear spaces
I've
are the
tried,
only ones.
No, I'm saying,
Yeah.
those ones in coals, by the way. I've tried making an appointment to go see a solar power plant, which no one responds. By the way, you'll find only 3 cars there. The CEO, CFO, PA, a couple of cars.
Yeah.
If you go to Kubek, there's almost 2,000 people working at Kubek. So if you're saying you are going to shut down Kubek and bring in renewables, so you are saying 2,000 people must lose jobs.
And their families and other
And
people.
yes, so that you just bring a couple of people who will work for renewables.
This is a political conversation and it's also a financial conversation, but it's an important one because in South Africa we keep speaking about foreigners and we keep speaking about the borders. And we might be dealing with foreigners and borders and immigration, but we have other issues which are more pertinent, which may be job losses and energy. Doesn't matter if we have foreigners or not. If we don't have energy and if we're not pricing it right, and then come 2024, people are going to be campaigning. They're going to be speaking about immigration, but they may not be speaking about energy outside of load shedding. The reality of what happens if we move into renewables. What happens as we keep decommissioning power plants.
Yes.
Gwede Mantashe is against the decommissioning,
He is.
which means there's an internal fight there. He's in charge of energy and mineral resources, and the fight is with maybe the president and other stakeholders at that level.
I don't know. I wouldn't say it's a fight. Let's say maybe
A disagreement.
Minister Mantashe now understands energy. He's one minister who understands this sector very well. So, and when we speak about decommissioning plants, people argue that because they have reached the end of life.
Yes.
I mean, does your car reach the end of life?
After you've paid it off.
Yes.
After your service plan is done, you keep
yes.
driving it if it's still in decent condition.
Exactly.
And especially if you don't have another car.
Yeah.
If you don't have the money to buy a brand new car, this car, it's 15 years old. I mean, I was driving a Toyota Tazz from 2006.
Mm-hmm.
As long as you're taking care of it, you're servicing it, you're changing the tires and those, until I have enough money to be able to buy a brand new Mercedes-Benz that is better, or maybe even just replace it with a Kia or a Hyundai now. I have to take care of that car. I can't just shut down the car because then I have to walk.
Then you've answered the issue of decommissioning coal power plants, because it's not like they reached the end of life because now they're
falling apart.
No, if you take care of those coal power plants, they can continue for as long as they can to provide electricity, which is what Minister Mantashe is arguing.
Yeah.
That Komati Power Station was giving us 1,000. Now it's giving us 300 megawatt, and people have lost jobs in the process. Imagine, when are we going to reach 21,000? When we reach 21,000 megawatt of those coal-fired power plants that have to be decommissioned, what's going to happen to this country? We can't even meet the minimum demand with what we have.
Yeah.
Without having decommissioned that 21,000 megawatt capacity of coal.
COP27 was in Egypt, and you said
Yes.
something about jet. What is that?
So after we have been given 8.5 billion US dollars to transition away from coal,
Yeah.
then the pledges, is it the right word?
I'm not sure.
Those who pledged 8.5 billion,
Oh,
they
yes,
said,
it is pledges.
Yeah. So we are not, they said,
Out
no.
of the goodness of their hearts.
Yeah, out of the
Siyabonga
goodness of
Germany
their
and
hearts.
America.
Yes. They said, okay, this 8.5 billion US dollars is not going to come until South Africa comes up with a plan to say how they're going to use it.
Yeah.
Then South Africa, the president had to establish what is called Presidential Climate Change Commission.
Okay.
Yes. So
Ngoba phela Ramaphosa loves commissions.
so that commission now came up with a document called JET IP, Just Energy Transition Plan.
Okay.
And
So
then-
the pledges were, it's like what happened now during the lockdown where Rupert and Oppenheimer pledged $1 billion, and to this day no one has seen it. We haven't received the money. They said we'll give you the money once we see this thing.
the plan is.
Okay. And
Because
then the
now-
plan was presented in Egypt.
The plan was now presented in Egypt.
Yeah.
Yes, it was even launched. There was a big launch there.
Yeah.
They launched the plan in Egypt, and meaning that we are now going to do what is in the plan.
Yeah.
But the plan is not a legal document like the integrated resource plan where the public takes, have a say in it. Like the integrated resource plan is a public document.
All of
It's
us
illegal.
can-
All of us can comment. That
comment
I
and
think it's
challenge,
very
etc.
important to mention to people that the IRP is due for review, and this is where South Africans come in to say, let's look at the IRP, because the current IRP does not speak to our challenges or our socio-economic challenges.
Yeah.
So let's look at it. Let's refuse to have our 21,000 megawatt of coal plants, decommissioned.
Yeah.
Because there's not even coal. There's only 1,500 megawatt. There's 2,500 megawatt of nuclear. But you have 21,000 megawatts of baseload power that needs to be decommissioned and replace it with what? Intermittent sources. Intermittent sources are those that are weather dependent.
Sure.
So they are not baseload.
After they presented,
So they
did the money
presented
come
it.
in?
I don't think it comes in. I mean, it's obviously not. It means that the independent power producers can now, come into the space and get money, and get funded.
Yeah.
And then when they get funded to provide this solar, ESCOM with this solar and all that, that money goes back to those countries, because where do we get those solar and wind turbines from? Solar panels and wind turbines from. So it's a bit tricky. So we do have the Just Energy Transition Plan, which it only has renewables, wind and solar, batteries, they call it battery energy storage system. Batteries.
Is that lithium? You don't know?
Yeah, it's made out of lithium, yes.
There's lithium in
Batteries.
Zimbabwe. Okay.
Yeah, it has batteries. Then and that's about it. And the budget for that JET IP is 1.5 to 1.9 trillion rand. Remember the
budget
story
from the budget that was set in the plan.
in the plan, 1.5 to 1.9 trillion rand. Remember the story of a trillion rand, expensive trillion rand nuclear deal,
Yes.
which was going to give us about 9,600 megawatts of power capacity. The JET, it's not even going to give us half of that. But it's 1.5 to 1.9 trillion rand. I think we also need to go back to a story of a trillion rand nuclear deal.
Yeah.
That deal was not going to cost 8 trillion rand. The experts in the nuclear industry, they did say, if South Africa were to build that 9,600 capacity of nuclear plants, they were going to cost just above half a trillion, 600,000 billion.
600 billion.
Yeah, 600 billion, yes.
Yeah.
Just above half a trillion. But no, those who are against nuclear, they continue to, perpetuate those lies to say, no, it was a trillion rand nuclear deal. That's why even in the State Capture Commission report, there's nothing of
About $1 trillion there.
because no one could prove it.
Yes.
Because the only way to know how much a nuclear build program is going to cost is when you now do request for proposals.
Sure.
Which
and
we
get quotations
yeah,
from
get
people that can
quotations.
build?
We never got quotations.
So these are
And
even the 600 billion is an estimate,
It's,
but
it's,
the
yeah,
one
it's still an
trillion
estimate.
doesn't even exist
It doesn't
anywhere.
even exist. And by the way, the renewables proponents, they are avoiding South Africa to go through request for proposal process because they know they are going to be proven wrong.
Yeah.
That's the process they don't even want to see happening.
I'm thinking in my head of this concept of us selling our coal to Germany, the UK, America, and parts of the European Union, and them taking that coal and pumping it into their industrialization projects, and part of those projects being the manufacturing of solar components, wind components, and then selling them back to us after having built them with coal. And how ironic that would be if that was the case. I'm also thinking of the concept, we speak about funding and money and politics now, of how many of the anti-nuclear lobbyists are actually funded and have their donors are the pro-nuclear people, or the people that want us to shift. If they would, I don't even know who these people are. If we were to see their funders, their donors, and see who actually says go out there and march, because money comes from somewhere. And I guess before we speak about Dubai and COP28, are you funded? Are you pushing an agenda? Do you genuinely believe in nuclear in your heart of hearts? Or is it just work? You're like, look, if I get funded for solar tomorrow, I'll advocate for solar. If I get funded for wind, I'll advocate. I'm only doing nuclear because I'm funded. Or are you doing nuclear because you actually think it's a great energy source?
First, let me say there are thousands of nuclear workers in South Africa, and you never hear them talking about nuclear or advocating for nuclear. They don't care because the nuclear industry, as I said, it's a global industry.
Yeah.
You can have a job anywhere in the industry. It doesn't really matter.
Anywhere in the
And I
world.
always fight with them. Like, why are you guys not saying anything? Because this is your industry, you need to fight for it. But I think for me, it's sort of a passion because when I learned about all these things, I realized that there's justice that is not being done in South Africa because we have this special energy source that no one speaks about. Then maybe it was time for me to say, let me go out there and start educating people. And I went, I'm not even doing it because of my work.
Yeah.
Because I'm here on my individual capacity.
Yeah.
My organization doesn't even agree to this. They don't care.
Sure.
You see.
They want you to focus on work.
On work, yes. So I did it, as my own person because I just wanted South Africans to learn about this thing that is so important for their survival,
Yes.
also or for the economic growth of this country.
Yeah.
So I'm doing it for that. I am not funded yet, but I would love to be funded because I do not speak for myself. I speak for many South Africans that need to know these things, and also for these energy technology developers who for a very long time neglected the issue of communication. Because that's the thing with the nuclear industry. They don't care about communication or PR. They're just doing their job. They're focusing on safety issues. You see all these issues that you've just discussed.
And they don't realize that they put themselves at risk by not speaking out.
By not speaking out.
Yeah.
So I said, let me do it for them. Let me help them. But also they need to help me to help them. So I am not funded yet. And I'm calling for the funders to say, come fund me. So that at least I become a louder voice than I am right now, because advocacy needs money. So
COP28 in Dubai, and you're speaking about advocacy. What is happening on the African continent when it comes to nuclear, and what do you think our agenda is going to be going to Dubai?
Okay, let's take it back to Glasgow.
Yes. Going back to Scotland.
Yeah, to Scotland. For a very long time, when these COP were happening, now we are on COP 28.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
For since COP 1 to COP 25, nuclear was not represented there.
At all?
Yeah, no, not at all. And nuclear is one of the cleanest technologies. The UN Economic Commission study, when they compared the major technology, energy technology sources, the emissions that for all these generation major electricity sources, they found that nuclear actually is less. So nuclear pollutes less, even less than sun and wind, by the way. So for a very long time, nuclear was not represented there. And we are thankful to organizations such as Nuclear for Climate. It's in Europe, which organizes all of us from different countries to say, you know what, we are going to have our own pavilion at COP, where we are going to advocate for nuclear.
Yeah.
And the big advocacy happened during COP26 in Glasgow. We were there. So I was not part of the South African delegation. They wouldn't dare call me because when they go there, they only discuss renewables. Yes. And
That is still the case even
it's
now.
still the case even now.
The South African government has no budget space for nuclear advocates here to go with them when they go to discuss energy issues globally.
No, they don't take us. They don't even take Minister Mantashe. But yeah, they don't.
That's shady. Sorry, we need to put that bookmark. It's shady that they wouldn't take the Minister of Energy and Mineral Resources.
Yes. When they go to discuss energy, the office that organized that is the office of the environmental department, Barbara Chris, and you find yourself, you find yourself, questioning these things to say how energy plays a very big part of climate change.
Yeah.
But you leave the Minister of Energy. And you just take the only the Minister of Environment there to discuss what. And there was a time when I was at the South African Pavilion in Glasgow. People came asking about energy issues, and then the lady who was sitting at the reception calls me to say, they are asking about this and that. Can you please help answer those questions?
Even though you weren't invited as a delegate.
No. So that's what happens. So we are thankful
Barbara
to
Creasy, the Minister of Environmental Affairs.
Yeah, okay. It's FFE.
Forestry,
Fisheries.
Forestry, Fisheries, and Environmental Affairs. Okay.
Yes. Then, so Nuclear for Climate organize us, all of us. Then we go there. Nuclear advocates.
Shout out to Nuclear for Climate, by the way.
We go there, all of us, and then we advocate for nuclear, and we just occupy the space.
Yeah.
Now they felt us in Glasgow. After Glasgow, European Parliament, they went as far as approving nuclear as part of their green taxonomy. Green taxonomy means that nuclear falls under green financing.
Yes.
So meaning the banks can finance nuclear projects under green financing. It's important to note that South African green taxonomy, it doesn't have nuclear.
Which means if you go to the banks now, because I know about Nedbank and these guys are pushing big on funding renewable. You're saying they don't fund nuclear. The banks, not
they would say that,
Nedbank.
Yes, because it's not in green taxonomy. I don't know if politicians even know there's a green taxonomy in this country.
So if they don't know, this is our chance to tell them
that
we need to look into these things and fund these ideas. So Zeslinde or AfriForum Nabo Orania to be the ones to raise these things when we actually are ready to discuss them ourselves.
Yes. So after Glasgow, the European Parliament put nuclear under green financing, green taxonomy. And then after, obviously, after Egypt, South Africa had jet IP without nuclear, even though Europeans have said nuclear should be under green financing or it's part of clean technologies. And by the way, their justification for not having nuclear in jet is that no studies have proven that nuclear is cheap. We have Eskom financials that actually have nuclear as 10 cents per kilowatt hour, but no, they said that. No studies. And then now going to COP28 in Dubai, it obviously we're still going to be discussing renewables there as South Africa and nothing else.
Okay. Sorry, please continue.
So obviously, as when we go to COP28 in Dubai, we're still going to be discussing nuclear. Mind you, last year we were in a country that is building nuclear power plant, Egypt. We are going to a country that is building nuclear again.
Which is Dubai.
Or
the UAE, rather.
UAE, yes. So, but when these countries, South Africa and other countries in Africa, when they get there, they're just there to discuss renewables. And what makes them discuss renewables more is to attract these pledges, you see.
Do you know if the rest of the African continent shares the views of South Africa? I mean, I know President Cyril Ramaphosa loves carrying himself like the head boy of all African leaders. Even though I think most people act like Paul Kagame is our head boy. But he carries himself as if he's the leader of all the African heads of state. Do they share the same thoughts? I mean, I saw Emerson Mnangagwa from Zimbabwe in Russia. One of the young leaders the young leader from Burkina Faso. They took over in a coup. He was there with his soldiers there. Do these people share the same? And this is where now we're going to touch on France and uranium and what's happening in Burkina Faso, Niger. If you feel other African nations feel the same about around nuclears and energy and etc.
Some do, such as Uganda and Rwanda, Zambia, Kenya, Ghana. Ghana has
got pro-nuclear or they
pro-nuclear. Okay. Ghana has even signed with US and Japan to build small modular reactors. Okay, don't ask me about technology. Small modular nuclear reactors, SMRs. And so many African countries are now pro-nuclear, and their presidents, they actually, unlike our president, who, have you heard him say the word nuclear?
I don't think so.
Yeah, some presidents, they loudly say the word nuclear. So there are countries such as those ones. Uganda have gone to such an extent of approving the site that is going, where they're going to build the nuclear power plant.
Yeah.
By the way, South Africa, we also approved the site to build a nuclear power plant during the President Zuma time, Fontaine. But we wanted... Fontaine, which is Koberg.
Okay, in the Western Cape.
But we wanted to build it in Eastern Cape, so we are still waiting for the environmental impact assessment authorization from DFFE.
Why the Eastern Cape?
Because obviously it's a coastal area and it's also the impoverished province.
Okay, so to create jobs and to stimulate the economy there.
Yes. Okay. So we need to do that. So we do have a site in the Eastern Cape.
Yeah.
And recently when we were at Russia-Africa Summit, we saw Zimbabwe and Ethiopia signing with a Russian company, Rosatom, to cooperate on, issues of peaceful uses of nuclear.
Rosatom is a state company in Russia for nuclear technologies.
Yes.
Okay.
So there are many countries in Africa who have actually decided to put nuclear as part of the energy mix. And I always say that Africa is going to be to the world what Hollywood is for actors.
Hectic.
For nuclear,
from a nuclear perspective.
From a nuclear perspective.
Who's supporting some of the African countries that are pushing? Do you have any idea? Because it seems like you always need people that have led in some of these spaces. I mean, you speak about France now and their power. We've spoken about Russia as well.
Thank you for that. You said our president acts like a head boy. He is a head boy. He's got nuclear programs in his country. So basically, South Africa has to lead the way to these nuclear build programs on the African continent, because we have got the skill, we have got the technology, we have the know-how.
Yeah.
By the way, over about 150 of people who built who are still working in the UAE nuclear program, that plant, are South Africans.
Please say that again.
About 150 of people who have built the United Arab Emirates nuclear plant are South Africans.
Our skilled people have to go overseas because we're not using them here.
Yes. Some of the people who are building the UK nuclear power plant are South Africans. There's a project called X Energy, which is going to be, doing small modular reactors. Those are people from PBMR, our South African technology. Yeah. The story of small modular reactor started in South Africa. But now Chinese have switched on their small modular reactor that is similar to our PBMR.
Yeah. I think in the interest of time, maybe we'll close it here. I don't know if you have any closing remarks. And in your closing remarks, I'd like you to address young South Africans, young black South Africans, young black female South Africans about the nuclear industry. We've already touched on the fact that you can study it after high school, and maybe also just the potential opportunities outside of just getting a job. Maybe there's potential for money. I think I've heard Gates and McKenzie saying there's uranium in the Karoo. You're saying now that in Namibia, 10% of the uranium is there, which means some of us need to go and visit Namibia because maybe we can become the Patrices of there. What would be your message maybe to them and maybe to everyone who would like to get in touch with the work you do and get involved with Africa for Nuclear and hopefully fund you as well and pledge?
Out of their generosity. My message to young people in South Africa is that the future of this country is in your hands. We are seeing how the current leaders have messed up because they have messed up. It's true. So we don't need to repeat the same.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we can do is to make sure that we end load shedding. We power 100% of the South Africans, because right now not everyone has power or has access to power in South
Correct.
Africa. We make sure that we power Africa and South Africa, and we make sure that we build more nuclear power plants just so that we can address our socio-economic challenges.
Yeah.
And that will not happen if people sit and mind their own business or do something else because issues of economic growth, unfortunately, they are boring. Some people find these
You're right.
topics very boring, but
You're
they
right.
are important. And when we discuss these topics, you find that we are among people who are against the development.
Yeah.
Because you cannot develop a country if you do not sort out the issues of access to electricity, uninterrupted access to electricity, so that we can attract investors.
Yeah.
To come and invest in our country. So we need to do that. With regards to the nuclear energy space, it's a very, interesting space. It's also entertaining in such that you get to be exposed to different people in different countries, and it also that you need to be focused.
Yeah.
And we need young people to start getting into the space.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean when you get into the space you need to be a scientist. I'm not a scientist or an engineer. No, you can get into a space without being a scientist, but just by studying the space and understanding it.
Yeah.
And we need more people who understand the space so that we can have more advocates. We need more of them. And so that we can eventually win the battle of having nuclear power plants.
Are you ready to be our Minister of Nuclear? When I become president and
Yes.
I'm looking to create another position?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Princess Mthombeni, Africa for Nuclear. I look forward to us having more engagements. I'm planning to take some time to do more studying on nuclear, specifically studying a company like Rosatom in Russia, because I feel like, as you were speaking about the apartheid government and industrialization, companies like Eskom, ISCO, Sasol, I think Telkom, Armscor and others, they had an agenda for the country. And I think if we're not going to do it in the private sector, those of us who are young enough need to start doing the work of saying, how do we build futuristic companies that are going to serve the future? It could be a nuclear company. It could be companies in technology. It could be companies maybe in shipbuilding, in airplanes, etc. And I think the time now is ripe for us to have those type of conversations. And I appreciate you coming here.